Welcome back to the Female Athlete Summit, the online platform for female athletes, coaches, and parents. The purpose of this summit is to educate and to have a conversation about topics surrounding female athletes on and off the playing field. Today, my guest is Dr. Haley Perlus, and we will be talking about mental toughness training. So, I'll tell you, Haley. Haley, welcome to the call.
Thanks very much, Chad. Glad to be here.
So obviously you and I have talked many times. I love your story on how you knew you wanted to be a sports psychologist. So can you share it with all the listeners?
Sure. When I was 12 years old, I was a competitive alpine ski racer. And I was competing in a world championship. So it was an international race with the best skiers in the world my age. And I was bib number 9. And bib number 8 is in the starting gate. So I had about 45 seconds until it was my turn to go. And my coach came up to me and said what coaches typically say. They give you some tips and tricks about the course and what to focus on in order to properly execute. But then my coach did something different. He took out a $100 bill. I was 12, placed it in front of my nose, and told me that he was betting on me to win this international race. And he told me that he had lost betting on an older teammate who was competing in a different event the week before, and that he was not prepared to lose today. He then pointed me in the direction of the starting gate. I had about 15 seconds left, smiled, and told me to go have fun. So in that moment, listen, I was 12 years old, so I wasn't exactly saying, well, my sports psychology mind knows this or that. So I didn't really know what was going on, but I knew something had gone on. And I do remember saying and thinking this: if my coach believes in me, why shouldn't I believe in myself? My coach believes in me with all of his experience and with all of his knowledge about everybody else in addition to myself. Why shouldn't I go and give this the best shot I can and believe in myself? So I did win the race, and it was pretty cool to get the trophy and everything. But I knew something bigger had happened. And 2 weeks later, my coach brought a sports psychologist to come and speak to our team. Ding, 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 ah, ha, ha. I knew exactly that's what I wanted to do. And so I went home at 12 and told my parents that I wanted to be a sports psych gal when I grew up.
And there you go. And now you are.
Easy peasy.
That's one of my favorite stories, and I've heard it 3 or 4 times. So obviously you're a sports psychologist. You see a lot of athletes. What else do you do in your practice?
Yes, a little bit of everything. So I do have my own consulting practice. I work with athletes, mostly 18 to 25 years old. So, just trying to get a scholarship or trying to put something together at college, right below the professional level, Olympic level. That's really the niche that I have right now for myself. And then I also am a professor. So I teach sports psychology, both undergrad and graduate, both in class and online at the University of Colorado. And then I'm a public speaker, so I travel quite a bit speaking at conferences, whether they're sport conferences, fitness conferences, and I do a lot of corporate training as well. So taking sports psychology principles and applying it to corporate. And then I create some content. I write a few articles for various publications.
You are a busy woman.
It's fun.
So you touched on it a little bit, but like the top 2 or 3 reasons why do athletes seek out your help?
Because they want to block out negative distractions, or they want to eliminate the stress and pressure and anxiety they're experiencing. And putting that together, they basically say that they're not competing as well as they're practicing. So when it counts, they struggle performing their best, even though they can do it all the time, day in and day out in practice.
I feel like that's every athlete that has ever played the game, what you just said. It's whether they're seeking out an expert to help them. So what are some of the techniques and tips you give them to try to help get their mental game match their physical?
Yeah, sure. So it really depends on a couple things, and timing is a big one. So if they come to me and they've got a big game the next day, we don't have a lot of time to really address why they are feeling anxious in the first place. So sometimes we just have to put a Band-Aid over a wound, and we talk about relaxation techniques, breathing techniques, pre-performance routines, specific self-talk that they can focus on while they're on the court. However, if I have the opportunity to work with an athlete off-season, pre-season, at least, with some time before the big game, if you will, then it's really getting to the story. a lot of the times it's all about negative stories that they're telling themselves. And that is what a mental block is. My humble opinion, in my experience, a mental block is a negative story that we're telling ourselves. And that negative story is paralyzing our bodies. It is literally, cutting us off at the neck, so our bodies resort to old patterns, old behaviors, old mistakes. So the mental block, the negative story, is debilitating. So what we need to do is one of three things. One is change situations sometimes. So sometimes we need to change teams. Sometimes we need to change equipment. Sometimes we need to change environments. If we can't do that, or if that's not the right answer, then we have to change the way we look at the situation. We have to change the story. We have to turn the negative story into a positive. And then we have to learn some coping mechanisms. And I can jump into that more if you'd like me to.
I would love you to.
So let's go back to my story. Let's go back when I was 12 and my coach bet on me. So we call that a stressor. That would be a stimuli, an event, a situation that can cause two types of responses. So one response is, wow, if my coach believes in me, then why shouldn't I believe in myself? And the athlete, such as myself, who was able to tell that positive story, I got excited, I got energized, and all the endorphins and chemicals that were released in my body because of the energy, even though I was nervous, it was still good energy. I was able to use that energy to perform my best. And that's what top performers do. They take the pressure, they take the stressor, being whatever is increasing their energy, and they use it to their advantage. So that would be a positive story. A negative story, and go back to my 12-year-old self, oh no, what if my coach is wrong? What if I let him down? What if I'm not as good as he thinks I am? What if I lose all focus and make a stupid mistake? What if? That is a negative story, mental block, literally makes my body freeze. And then I lack coordination, I lack fluidity, and my performance is going to suffer as a consequence.
Do you find that many of the negative stories that these athletes tell themselves are like a trauma they had from a coach or a parent, or like it's like kind of in their head, I guess? It's their negative story.
Could be both.
Okay.
Could be one or the other, it could be both. Absolutely. It's, sometimes you hear something. So sometimes a coach or a parent says something, whether they put pressure on you, whether they threaten you, whether they tell you that you really screwed up. Those thoughts have the ability to stick with us. And suddenly, because of that one comment, suddenly we can never make a free throw. Suddenly we never execute under pressure. Suddenly we suck. So sometimes that gets to us. Other times, if you, for some reason, as it happens, we all go through little slumps here and there, right? Performance is up and down. When someone's on their best, there's another athlete not playing their best. And when you focus on all the things you're doing wrong, which may be legit, you may be making errors, but if you're only focusing on those things, it's like quicksand. You make one mistake, you harp on that one mistake, you make another mistake, and then you sink further like quicksand. So it can be both.
So I'm sure you watch a lot of sports, and as do I. I mean, obviously basketball is my sport. When I watch sports, you can tell which athletes, in my eyes, are just mentally tougher. They're just tough. And then you can see the other athletes, or even in the strength room when I'm working with them, they're not tough. Like there's nothing toughness about them. Is it like kind of like, do people have like are they just born mentally tough, or do you need to kind of build that muscle?
Well, I think I have a career in sports psychology exists because it is a muscle we can build.
You know what I mean. You know what I'm talking when you see an athlete out there. There's an athlete that might not, maybe they're getting help, we don't know, but there's athletes that are just tougher than other athletes.
I believe in both nurture and nature. So for some athletes, they are just, they're born that way, but they still have to plant. They still have to water that seed, right? They still have to continue to finesse it and grow, because it could easily turn over. But yeah, and then there are other athletes who definitely need to learn these skills from the very beginning, the foundational development, if you will.
So you and I were talking earlier off camera about how, like, just in general in today's society, our young athletes, anxiety, depression, stress is out of control. Thoughts on why that is, and what would you say to the female athletes out there to help them cope?
Okay, so yes, I believe that female athletes are experiencing a lot of stress. Do I think that we're experiencing more stress than ever before? I'm not sure. I'm not so sure. I think it's relative. So I think sport is sport is stressful. But with all of the distractions that we have, there are more distractions today than I think there ever have been. So it's a different type of anxiety and stress that we face. Social media is a big one. If I were to simplify it, I would look at two things. One is we need to be able to tell ourselves the more facilitative story, the one that's going to help us instead of hurt us. And with, bullying going on right now, and the ability to comment anonymously, I mean, that can really hurt our stories. They can really turn our stories very negative. So we have to be able to ask ourselves the right questions in order to turn that story around. And the techniques have been around forever. It's called cognitive restructuring. We ask ourselves questions. We reframe our negative statements to positives. We dissect the negative statement and really ask, is that true? Do you always choke under pressure? Really, do you always choke under pressure? Because if your coach is asking you to play and not keeping you on the bench, your coach obviously sees that you're not always choking under pressure. So you kind of get into the meat of it so that you can change your story around. So that would be one mechanism to really dissect the story that we're telling ourselves. The other one is to turn off those distractions. So if I can stick with basketball, even though it's not female basketball, and I may get it wrong, but LeBron James, does he call it 0 dark 23? Like he goes.
The fact that I should know this and I do not. So I have no idea. Someone will correct us. Don't worry if we get it wrong.
Okay, good. But Steph Curry, they also do it. So these are two athletes, at the top of their game in basketball, best in the world, if not all time. These two athletes, they go dark when they need to perform their best. In other words, they turn off their phones. They eliminate the distraction by powering off, so that they can then zone in to what is relevant. And that's where I'm gonna jump on. So a lot of the times we feel anxious because we are distracted. And what we were distracted by are all the things that are irrelevant to our performance in the moment. But we're focused on the things that have nothing to do with our performance. And we're running with those instead of literally powering them off, pressing mute on them, either imaginary or literally pressing mute on them, and zoning in to the skills that we need to apply, skills that we need to execute on the court, the strategies that we've worked on with our teammates and our coaches that we need to participate in, the goals that we've set for ourselves, the goals that our team have set for us. Those are the relevant cues, but we're getting way too much distraction on the irrelevant stuff, which is causing a lot of unnecessary, in my opinion, anxiety.
I 100% agree. Like when I played basketball, it was in the early 2000s. Facebook really wasn't around. So if you had a bad game, like your family was at the game, they'd know it, your coaches and your teammates. Now, if you have a bad game, your 5,000 friends on Facebook know it. I just think the stressors of these kids, from my point of view, is just so much more than it was when I played. I also don't think I had a cell phone until I was like a junior in college, and now we have cell phones at the age of 8. So it's definitely more like screen time, and I do believe we just need to shut it down. I agree with that. What?
You can't completely. I mean, you still want to have a life, and you still want to participate in all that stuff. But there are moments when you do yourself a disservice by keeping all that stuff open.
So it's a healthy balance. That's why I'm sure it's a balance that people need to try to find, whether you're an athlete or an adult in the real world right now.
And let me jump in before you move on. Let me jump in with one more thing. The other thing is stress. It's not a bad word, and I think we're giving it a bad word. Anxiety to me is a negative emotional response. So anxiety to me is negative. Anger, fear, frustration, worry. Yes, we can perform when we're angry, fearful, frustrated, and worried, but it uses up a lot of energy. So we can't live our lives like that. But stress, that's how we grow. I mean, you put a weight in your arm and you do bicep curls, you are adding load, you are adding stress to your bicep muscle for it to rebuild and grow and repair during recovery. But you're adding load, and that's what we need to do. We need to add stress to our lives. We need to embrace stress so that we can become stronger performers. But we have to be able, but then again, that goes to that storytelling, right? It's bring it on. I feel pressure because I believe in myself. My coaches are telling me that they expect this stuff because they believe in me. So I'm going to use that, and I'm going to bring that stress and use it to my advantage.
It's an interesting way that you put it about if like stress is good, it builds body. Because with the strength coaches that have been on, they're saying their job is to put stress on the female athletes so they're ready to perform when they need to at the highest level. So again, you just kind of spun it around, and I never thought about that. So I like it.
Cool.
So I would like your point of view, your expertise, talking to the coaches out there, how to support these athletes if they're going through, anxiety, a tough time with a negative story, what the coaches can do to support these athletes.
So yeah, if they can take some time and engage in some conversation, whether it's probing questions or priming questions or helping them see the other side. So it could be, an athlete says a statement like, I always choke under pressure situations. I can never make a free throw at the end of the game. All of these statements, if a coach can say, well, is that really true? Like, let's actually look at this. And, you come up with examples to refute that negative statement so that an athlete can actually say, okay, yeah, no, I see that I'm actually doing myself a disservice by being way too hard on myself, because it's not always that way. If it is always that way, if it is true, then the coach has a responsibility to say, it will be okay. You can improve by focusing on this specific technique, this specific skill. I want you to spend 15 minutes every day after practice, and all I want you to do is stand there and throw. All I want you to do is dribble up and down the court. All I want you to do is whatever specific technique or tactics. A coach has then the opportunity to give some very specific feedback to this athlete, which then will allow the athlete or help the athlete, because coach can't do it. They can only control what they can control. It is up to the athlete to execute. But the athlete then can shelf the I can't to the I can, provided I do this stuff. And they can then make that the focus of their mindset. That becomes relevant, and then the I can't is actually an irrelevant statement.
I think all sports teams need to hire you or hire someone that is a sports psychologist to work with their athletes, because we were talking about the Division I level yesterday with a sports performance coach, and one of the things she said is it's hard. Like, it's your job now that you come in, and coaches sometimes don't have the luxury to talk so nicely and be supportive because it's their job. And if they start losing, it's added stress on them. So if a coach is just riding you and you just can't seem to like get out of your funk, what would you say to the player and the coach there to try to just help everyone to start playing great?
It's like the definition of insanity, right? You keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. Obviously, either the athletes are not hearing, or somewhere along the line there's limited communication, even though both are trying their hardest. I'm not saying that they're not trying and doing their best, but something's got to give. So in that moment, and I put it on the coach, I do, because I think the coach has the responsibility to say, okay, this isn't working, talk to me. How are you, let's get at this. And female athletes want to talk more. They want to be able to express themselves. And sometimes coaches need to let them vent a little bit so that you can strengthen that rapport, and then you can figure out how it needs to be. When I consult an athlete, I do a lot of virtual consulting, but anytime I am face-to-face with an athlete, what I like to do is have the athlete teach me something. So often it's me getting onto the court, getting onto the field, getting in the water, whatever it may be. And I let them teach me something about their sport, teach me a skill. What that does is twofold: to build rapport, because I'm willing to get my hands dirty, but I also very quickly learn how they like to learn, because how they're teaching me is how they learn. most often. And that allows me to structure my lessons according to how they learn best. Are they visual? Are they, do they not want to talk a lot and they just want the how to? Just give me the goods, give me the meat. Do they need explanation? Do they need to see it, feel it? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah, so you learn a lot about athletes when you actually communicate with them, not just verbally, but you get both people get their hands dirty.
I'm picturing you on the basketball court, and I can't wait to see that. That's what I want to see.
I've never been. I was always more of an individual sport player, but I'll do it. I will do it, and probably make a little bit of a fool of myself, but that's part of it, and laugh it
No,
off.
of course.
And then they can see me make mistakes and recover. And that's another big thing that I'm going to say about stress right now. There is this thing about needing to be perfect and demanding it of athletes, where athletes are so focused on being perfect that they're scared to even try. So they actually hold back because they can't take that risk because they're too afraid of the consequences if it's not perfect. So they don't put forth effort at all. Both are failures to me. But I would much rather an athlete fail and take a risk than an athlete fail because they didn't put forth the effort. But we are instilling this fearful environment, this fearful community with our athletes. So I think of something that the coaches need to pass on to their athletes is, I'm okay with you making a mistake. In fact, maybe, hopefully you'll agree with me. If not, please disagree with me. But often the athletes that are on top at the end of the day are the ones that best recovered from mistakes, and not the ones.
Absolutely.
So the coaches need to communicate the message is, I would much rather you make a mistake because you are risking it, and then I want to see you recover, as opposed to failing because you're not putting forth the effort.
I mean, I feel like you need to like risk yourself, put yourself out there, fail, because then you learn and it won't happen again. I mean, I'm a big believer in that. So I know you said you work with like athletes. Do you ever work with teams?
I do.
Like,
And actually, as soon as in 3 days time, I'm flying happen to be in Colorado. I'm flying to Canada and Toronto, and I'm going to be working with a team of 33 athletes, right?
So when you work with a team, what is your approach different to what you're trying to figure out how to help them?
Is my approach different? No, everything that I've been discussing with you is the same principles that I discuss with the athletes. And when I have the opportunity, so for this particular team, it's a 6-day. So I worked with them 3 days prior, and I'm working with them 3 days now, and I would even like to continue it. So it's the same thing. I get with them as a team. So we have discussions. I get with them individually, even if it's 10 minutes here and there, just to get with them and teach them how to communicate by example, leading by example. And then I also get to discuss and convey what I'm conveying to you, to their coaches. And I get to be with them in practice. I get to be with them in competition.
Nice. Do you give them homework or like kind of techniques you want them to try and then report back?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I try to make it as simple as possible, because you don't want, journaling. Oh God, the eyes roll when I ask them to journal. But if I give them, all you got to do is put a check mark or an X, or, put one little word. You don't have to write a novel. You don't have to, it's not being marked. There's no spell check. I mean, it's kind of more turnkey. Then yeah, I try to make it as simple as possible so that they are actually more engaged at the forefront. And then when they learn that it's actually working for them, then they buy into it and they want to do more.
I love that you're working with teams. I wish more colleges, and I think they are trying to seek out more sports psychologists. I think having some go into the high school and talk to the kids as they're younger to try to help build their mental muscle up. So we talked about a lot of things today. In wrapping up, is there anything else you want to add to what we talked about?
Well, I tell you, use the mental muscle, and I think that is probably, and we are getting better. Absolutely, we're getting better. The sports psychology programs, the graduate programs, they're growing. When I was doing my PhD, there was 2 people in my program, and now it's definitely growing. But it is mental muscle, and muscles need stress to develop. So it is not something that some people are born, risk takers, but it is a muscle that we need to practice. We need to work at. We need to develop. And I want people to know that it doesn't just come like this. You got to put forth the effort. You got to put forth the time. You got to invest the energy.
It's a journey, you know that. It's always trying to get better. So as always, it is a pleasure to talk to you. If people want to find more about you, where can they find you?
I know you're like, can we find you on social media?
You do YouTube. I know you do YouTube, but like, what's your website? I like your whatever you call them, your minutes or something.
My mental toughest moment, yeah, is on YouTube. But the best thing to do is just go to my website, which is drhaleyperlus.com. So drhaleyperlus.com.
Awesome, my friend. It's always a pleasure talking, and hopefully we will see each other soon.
Thanks, Jen. I look forward to it.